Welcome to FPTV New Releases, and welcome to my very special guest for today, Nina Allan. Nina's debut novel, The Race, was shortlisted for the John W. Campbell Memorial Award, the BSFA Award, the Kitschy's Red Tentacle follow-up, The Rift, won the BSFA Award and the Kitschy's Red Tentacle, and she's won the BSFA Award for short fiction, the Grand Prix de l'Imaginaire and the Aeon Award. And Nina has been shortlisted for the British Fantasy Award 4 times and was a finalist for the 2014 Shirley Jackson Award. And she has an excellent blog at ninaallan.co.uk. How are you, mate?
I'm great, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
And it's really lovely to see you. And we're here today to talk about your fascinating new release, which has just been published by our colleagues at Titan Books, Ruby. Now, before we get into the fabric of the book, Ruby has had a very interesting history. Could you talk us through that, please, Nina?
Sure. It's the original text of Ruby was published as Stardust, the Ruby Castle Stories, all the way back in 2013 as a limited edition sort of new voices volume from PS Publishing, Pete and Nikki Crowther. And that was it was a wonderful moment. It was sort of like my third full-length book, and the second book in what I'd call these sort of like loosely structured, what I call them is fractured novels. The Silver Wind being the first, which Titan reissued last year, and then Stardust, i.e. Ruby as she is now, in 2013. And the stories in the volume were always written, they were written to be read together, they were written to be a single volume. So I'd never call this a short fiction collection. I'd call it, again, a fractured novel or a story cycle, in that all the stories are related, interlinked. You can read each one as a standalone story, and indeed a couple of them were published in advance as standalone stories. The Lammas Worm was in Tartarus's Strange Tales, either Strange Tales 2 or 3, I forget which one. And it was later in one of Ellen Datlow's Best New Horror volumes. So they do work as standalone pieces. But if you read them as a continuum, as a single volume, I hope and think you get a lot more from them, because you'll get all these echoes between stories. You will understand more about characters, and you will see recurring characters throughout the cycle, even though each story takes place in a different place and very often a completely different time as well. So I see Ruby very much as a natural follow-up to The Silver Wind, in that it keeps following and exploring the theme of time, what time does, how time passes, how strange time works in its alienating effects and its renewing effects. And so yes, it was very much a natural follow-up for me at the time, and it feels really appropriate that Titan is publishing Ruby exactly a year after The Silver Wind.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, we were talking about the blurring of the lines between forms that Ruby represents, and that kind of re-editing that's gone on for this new edition.
Yeah.
Now there is also a new story included within the fabric. Could you tell me a bit about that, please, Nina?
Well, it was part of the joy of bringing Ruby to Titan and to a wider audience that Titan will be able to give the book, was precisely what you say, being able to re-edit it. And as befits the character of the book, I re-edited it as a single volume. I put it all together worked through as if I were editing a novel. And I had promised Kath, my editor at Titan, that I would include a new, as I did with the Silver Wind. The Silver Wind had several new pieces in it. I said with Ruby also, I wanted to include a new story, both for myself, so to bring myself back fully into contact with the material again, because it's been a while. And I tend to have a horror of rereading my own work. So once something's out in the world, I very often really don't look at it again. I'm always terrified of finding things wrong with it, or things I don't like, and just the simple fact that by then I'm working on something else. So the idea of writing a new piece of fiction for Ruby for this edition was really attractive to me. And also, what I very much wanted to do was to bring Ruby Castle herself more strongly into focus, because the original stories in the volume, they sort of circle her. You see her as a young woman, you see her through the eyes of others, you see her on screen as a film actor, but you don't get much hands-on time with Ruby herself. And I wanted to change that. I wanted the new story to, as it were, cast a whole new light on the volume as a whole. And so the new story, Red Queen, brings Ruby, I hope, more strongly into focus. And I just think it might help readers gain, if not exactly closure, because I don't tend to go in for closure that much in my fiction, but to bring them a greater sense of connection with the eponymous character.
Yes, that's very interesting. What are the challenges represented by when you're telling if the overarching narrative, these impressions and the life story of a figure that we don't get to spend that much time in the mind of directly, and it's all, it's everything around the character that illustrates the character. What are the challenges for you as a creator putting that together? As opposed to, say, if you're Chandler and you're writing about Philip Marley, it's all through his head all the time. This is a very different thing. So what was the challenge for you, and what was interesting for you to write it that way?
It's weird. This is a question that often comes up. How do I put these things together? And I always feel sort of like I don't feel particularly clever in it, because it's simply the way I like to write. If I have one overarching problem as a writer, it's almost a surfeit of ideas, a surplus of things and people I want to talk about. And every book I've written has encountered some form of this issue. There's one character begets another, one story begets another, and it's almost a matter of having to choose, and in some cases being quite ruthless with who I end up centering the book upon. And with Ruby, it's interesting. Her story was there in the back of my mind all along, who she was, what she did, why she did it. The horrific kind of, I don't know, prejudice or difficulties she encountered on being a woman in the film industry, of which we've all heard a great deal in the last couple of years. And
yes.
This was it all in my mind, but it was always filtered through, well, then, this happened, or what if that happened, or what happened before that, or what about her wider family? Why did she feel such a pressing need to get away from her background? And sort of like every question I asked myself about Ruby seemed to give me another idea for a story. And I love fractured narratives. I love to read them. I certainly love to write them. I find that if I'm writing what you'd call a sort of almost a secondary world immersive narrative for too long. There's almost a kind of knockback reaction to break it, to actually either break the fourth wall, or to give another point of view, or to go off on some tangent that I've seen that interests me. And so the issue in the end is bringing it all into some form of cohesion. And for me, the drafting process is absolutely paramount in this, because my first drafts will just be this basic. I mean, I've got one at the moment. I've just recently finished a first draft of a new novel, and it is just like an enormous dump of information on the page. I have got 100,000 words. I have got a story arc, but there is so much there. I have learned so much about that book in the process of writing it. I've discarded so many words in the process of writing it. What I need now is I will go back to page 1. I will begin redrafting it in the knowledge of what the story is, and therefore I'll be able to strengthen all. It's like that, you know, putting together a piece of IKEA furniture, you know, the little Allan key.
Yes, absolutely.
Tightening all those joints as you come to them, because you know what you've now got your diagram to just extend that metaphor beyond its practical use. You know, you now know what it should look like. You can concentrate on making it look like that, and firming up those connections that are now very present and alive to you as the writer through that first draft process.
Thanks for sharing that with me. I think that's a truly fascinating, and I love the IKEA analogy. Makes such a complete amount of sense. I will never look at those Allan keys, which my place is full of those things, and those Allan keys are my nemesis. You know, it's like, oh, not one of these again. But that I feel completely. You've transformed my relationship with that IKEA construction process now. And finally, before we close, what do you think of the new? I saw the new package for the book that has been put together. I think it looks absolutely lovely as an artifact, as a piece to have in your hand. It must be nice, having been through this process, to have it be published in such a beautiful package.
It's absolutely stunning, and as a, you know, by timely coincidence, my author copies actually turned up about half an hour ago.
There we go.
I've just been admiring. I mean, I've obviously seen the cover, and, you know, thanks to wonderful Julia Lloyd for another stunning.
Oh, she's an amazing talent, Julia. She's phenomenal.
She just seems to key into what I write. Like, every cover she's done for me has been just almost more beautiful than the last, and it's the thing about when you read, you know, people reading Ruby for the first time will actually discover how accurately and beautifully and imaginatively that cover locks into the content of the book. It's not just a chance image. It really speaks to the book, and it means you're opening the world of the book right from the minute you see the cover. And it's just so lovely knowing that from the initial printing of 500 copies from PS, the book is now going to be available both sides of the Atlantic to readers who haven't been able to encounter, because I think the hardback's been sold out now for many years. And just being able to and knowing that I've got it into the shape that I wanted it to, and, you know, as you say, repackaged, new story, it does feel like a real celebration. And, you know, goodness knows we need as many of those as we can have this year. And so it's a journey through the weird. I'd say that, you know, Ruby showcases, if you like weird fiction, you're going to find something in there. You've got folk horror, you've got some bit of SF, a bit of body horror, and it's all, you know, I think of Ruby as the journey through the weird, and that funhouse mirror glisten and glimmer on the cover gives hints of that. And I really just hope that new readers enjoy it, and that anyone who has encountered Ruby before will feel tempted to, you know, meet her again and see all the new little surprises that are there in the new text.
I mean, I think it's such a beautiful package, so wonderfully written by yourself, that I'm sure both of those things will happen. And it's a treat for people who love the character, love it as the books that appeared previously, and will love this great new package, which I think does visually does a tremendous service to the beauty of the work inside.
Thanks
And Nina's Ruby was published in the UK by Titan Books on October the 6th. It was published in the USA on October the 20th. And it is available for order from Forbidden Planet at the links attached to this interview. Nina, it's so lovely to meet you. Thank you very much for sharing that 15 minutes with me. That was awesome.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy, a real pleasure. Thank you.
You take care. I'll see you soon. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.